So in order to create an actual user that will be added into our users database, we're going to do something really cool. Let's go back to our login screen view model, and where we create user with email, right after we know that this is successful, we're going to do as follow. I'm going to say val, I'm going to create a variable called display name. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is, let's take this task object. This task object has a lot of information, as you will see. So I'm going to say task dot, I'm going to get result, and then I'm going to go ahead and get the user that was just created, all right, like this, and then I'm going to go and get the email of that user. But I don't want just the email. What I'm going to do is, the email is usually something like this. Let's see, me at gmail.com. What I'm going to do instead, I want to just get the name, right? The username of the person, and then create a display name, and then get rid of anything else after that, right? So to do that, I'm going to use the split function. You can pass a regular expression there to say, where do we want to split this from? I want to split things from the at character. In fact, let me just put inside of a character, perhaps this will be better. Say at, like this. Okay, now we have some issues here because we need to make sure that we replace with safe. And so what this will return, actually, it will return an array that will divide everything from this side like this. So what I'm going to do now, this is going to be index 0 and the rest is going to be index 1. So I just want the index 0, which is going to be the actual display name or username, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and say get the index 0 item. Looks like we need to replace with safe like this. Voila. Okay. Right? So now I should have something just like this, me, for the display name. And I'm going to use that then to pass it along this other method. I'm going to create other function called create user. And I'm going to pass the display name as such. So let's go ahead and create this create user function. And there it is. It was created. And what is that we want to happen here? One, we're going to obviously add this user as an object here in our database. But for that, we need a few pieces of information. Number one, as we add these users, we also want to be able to have a field, right, that will contain the user ID. If we go back to our authentication here, you'll see that our user ID or our users, they all have this UID here. So this is their ID, unique ID. So we want to get that ID, and so when we create this user that we're going to be adding into our user database, we want to attach it just like we have first name and last name. We want to attach it as a user ID, okay, for this user. So how do we do this? Well, I'm going to say val, let's say user ID. I can get that from auth object because it knows everything really, and say current user and get the UI ID, because it has the reference of the current user that it's logged in. Because at this point we have logged in a user, and auth holds that user ID with it, like in a session. Okay, let's go ahead and replace it like this, nullables. Okay, so next now we are going to create then the user that we want to pass along here so we can then save it. How do we create that user object? Now remember, to save anything into our user database here, into our Firestore, there are certain types that need to be created. In this case, we need a hash map. So for now, I'm just going to create a val called user. It's just going to be a mutable map of, I'm going to have string and any, like this. We're going to change this anyway. So then I can say user. For the key, I'm going to say user underscore ID. I'm going to set that to a user ID that we're passing. We got there. say toString. Looks like that's what's going to happen. And I'm going to say user again. Let's just say display name for now. Display name like this. And this is going to be display name that we're passing there. Okay, I can just go ahead and see it like this, or just say toString. I'm going to just say toString to specify the type. All right, so now we have our user, which is going to be a map, which is the type that is needed for Firebase. So now it's easy for me to go and do the following. I'm going to say Firebase, instantiate of Firebase Firestore. That's what we need, by the way. I'm going to say dot get instance like this, and I'm going to create a collection, and the collection is going to be users. Okay, and then I'm going to say dot add. In this case, I'm going to add our user. So now this create user is going to be called anytime, the moment that when we create a user with email and password, the moment we know this task is successful, we're going to remove all the junk from our email and so forth and get the first item before the @ sign to make that our display name. And we're going to pass that along to our create user, which in turn takes that, wraps it inside of a mutable map of, and then we pass in the user ID, and voila. So now we should have a user when we add this that's going to have a user play name or display name and a user ID. Of course, later we're going to add other fields and so forth, but this is just for testing. Let's go ahead and run this. All right, let's go ahead. We need to sign up again because that's how all of this will work. And say Raphael.me.com. Okay, let's go ahead and say click, and voila, we went home. That means everything worked, and we should have, we'll go back to our users. I'm going to refresh. If all goes well, we should see another user added. In fact, I think I didn't have to refresh at all because there was a user that was already added there, I think. Okay, there we go. There it is. You see there's Raphael, and we have that user ID, which is awesome. And this user ID, B8JZ, let's go to our auth, and should have the same ID. Awesome. You'll see the advantages we'll have later to what we have right now. This is really, really good. All right. Congratulations. So it wasn't that hard. You see here, once we have the system, all of the parts put together, right? It's really easy to get everything, round everything up and start using it. So if you look at the Firebase Firestore, it's really easy to use. It's not really that hard. The setting up can, take a little bit of time, and you have to be a little bit careful. But once everything is set up, it's really, really easy to create, to use the back end here, create our database, users database. We can create other collections, obviously, but we have this database which has collections, we have users and so forth, and we can authenticate users and create users and log them in, and all of that is given. We didn't have to create all of this infrastructure ourselves, which is really awesome. All right, so we're able then to actually create our users and add them into our users collection here.